Have you ever wondered if the worst betrayal of your life could actually be the universe pushing you towards something far better than you ever imagined? What if I told you that being abandoned at your most vulnerable moment might just be the greatest gift in disguise? The windscreen wipers struggled against the relentless October downpour, turning the motorway ahead into a watercolor painting of grays and browns. Charlotte Preston placed both hands protectively over her rounded stomach, 7.5 months swollen with life, as their Range Rover hit another pothole that sent shockwaves through her entire body. Every jolt was a reminder of just how uncomfortable pregnancy could be, especially when you were this far along. "Darling, might we pull over shortly?" she asked, keeping her tone light and measured. "The baby's pressing rather insistently on my bladder, and I've been holding on for nearly 40 minutes now." Her husband, Marcus, kept his eyes fixed rigidly on the road ahead. His jaw clenched in that particular way that told Charlotte he was irritated, that familiar expression she'd been seeing more frequently over the past few months. "We'll reach the spa hotel in roughly 90 minutes, he said curtly. "Surely you can manage until then?" "Marcus, I wouldn't ask if it weren't urgent. Your daughter is practically sitting on top of my bladder. It's becoming rather painful, actually." He exhaled sharply, the sort of exasperated breath that made Charlotte feel like a burdensome child rather than his pregnant wife. Right then, there should be a petrol station appearing soon. Charlotte swallowed her retort. There had been a time, not so terribly long ago, when Marcus would have been attentive to her every need, particularly now when she was carrying their child. But that version of their marriage felt like it belonged to another couple entirely, people they used to be in what felt like another lifetime. The petrol station emerged from the downpour like something out of a dream, a solitary outpost with 2 ancient pumps and a flickering fluorescent sign that barely penetrated the gloom. Marcus steered beneath the metal canopy, and Charlotte fumbled awkwardly with her seatbelt, her pregnant belly transforming even the simplest tasks into Olympic challenges. She pushed open the door and stepped into the thick, humid air. Her cream-colored dress was already clinging uncomfortably to her skin from the dampness. The rain hammered against the metal roof above them with an almost deafening intensity. As she moved toward the small building, praying there was a functioning toilet inside, Marcus's voice cut through the drumming rain. "Charlotte, we need to have a conversation." She turned, puzzled by something in his tone. He'd climbed out of the car as well, standing beside the driver's door. There was something in his face she couldn't quite identify, something frighteningly distant. "Could we possibly discuss this after I've used the facilities?" she asked, shifting uncomfortably. "No, this needs to happen now." He paused, and she watched his knuckles whiten as he gripped the car door. "I simply cannot continue with this charade any longer." "Continue with what charade?" But even as the words left her mouth, a nauseating dread began spreading through her chest. This marriage, fatherhood, all of it. His voice was flat, emotionless, as though he were reciting a shopping list. "I genuinely believed I could go through with it, but I was mistaken. You're not the same person I fell in love with, Charlotte. You've become someone entirely different." Charlotte stared at him, rainwater streaming down her face, her dress now completely soaked through. "I'm pregnant, Marcus. Of course I've changed. I'm growing our daughter inside me." "That's precisely the problem," Marcus said, and now there was something almost frantic in his voice. "I don't want this existence. I don't want the obligation, the constant noise, the utter chaos that's coming. I want my freedom back." "Your freedom?" Charlotte's voice rose despite her best efforts to remain calm. "What about our lives together? What about our daughter?" "I'm continuing to the spa hotel," Marcus said, pulling open the car door. "On my own. I need time and space to think properly." "Marcus, you cannot simply abandon me here. I'm 7.5 months pregnant. For God's sake." The panic was setting in now, cold and razor-sharp, cutting through her disbelief. "You'll sort yourself out. You've always been rather resourceful when you need to be." He slid into the driver's seat. Charlotte lunged forward desperately, grabbing at the door, but Marcus yanked it shut. She could see him through the rain-streaked window, his face set with determination, deliberately avoiding her gaze. The engine roared to life. "Marcus! Marcus, please!" She pounded frantically on the window, her voice cracking. "Please don't do this to us." The Range Rover began to move, and Charlotte stumbled backward, her feet slipping treacherously on the wet tarmac. She crashed down hard onto her knees, her hands splaying out to break her fall, watching in complete disbelief as the luxury vehicle pulled away from the petrol station and vanished into the torrential rain. For what felt like an eternity, Charlotte remained kneeling there in the downpour, unable to process what had just occurred. Her husband had abandoned her at a remote petrol station, 7.5 months pregnant, in the middle of a storm. The baby kicked forcefully, as if protesting the entire situation, and that movement jolted Charlotte back to reality. She needed to get inside. She needed help immediately. The petrol station was shabby and clearly neglected, but at least it offered shelter from the rain. A spotty teenage attendant behind the counter glanced up from his mobile phone with vague curiosity as Charlotte stumbled through the door, dripping wet and trembling violently. "You all right, miss?" he asked, his eyes widening. "Might I possibly use your telephone?" Charlotte managed, her voice shaking. "My husband has left me stranded here, and I don't have my handbag with me." The boy's eyes grew even wider as he took in her obviously pregnant state and soaked appearance. "Bloody hell. Yeah, of course. Here you go." He handed her the phone. Charlotte's hands trembled as she tried desperately to think of whom to call. Her mother lived in Cornwall, hours away. Her closest friend was working in Dubai. Marcus's parents would undoubtedly take their son's side. They always had done. Whom could she possibly ring? Then she realized something even more horrifying. She didn't actually know anyone's telephone number by heart. Everything had been stored in her mobile, which was in her handbag, which was currently in Marcus's car. "Do you have any way to look up telephone numbers?" she asked the attendant desperately. He shook his head apologetically. "Internet's rubbish out here, miss. Signal drops out half the time anyway." Charlotte sank into a plastic chair near the window, pressing her hand protectively against her belly. "What on earth am I going to do?" she whispered to herself. The attendant shifted uncomfortably. "Want me to ring the police or something?" Before Charlotte could respond, another vehicle pulled into the petrol station. Through the rain-streaked window, she could see a navy blue Audi. A man emerged, holding a rolled-up newspaper over his head as he jogged toward the building. He pushed through the door, shaking off the rain, then stopped abruptly when he spotted Charlotte. She must have looked absolutely wretched, sitting there in her soaked dress, mascara presumably streaked down her cheeks, heavily pregnant and visibly distraught. "Are you quite all right?" he asked immediately, his voice filled with authentic concern. Charlotte looked up at him. He appeared to be in his early 40s, with warm eyes and dark hair graying distinguishedly at the sides. He wore a charcoal gray suit that had gotten damp despite the newspaper, and there was something remarkably steady and trustworthy about his presence. "My husband abandoned me here," she heard herself saying. Then, to her absolute mortification, she burst into tears. The man moved swiftly, crouching down beside her chair. "It's quite all right. Everything's going to be fine. Let's work this out together, shall we? My name's Oliver. Oliver Thornton." Over the next several minutes, the entire story came pouring out. Oliver listened attentively without interruption, his expression growing increasingly troubled as Charlotte explained what Marcus had done. "That's absolutely despicable," Oliver said when she'd finished, "particularly given your condition. Do you have somewhere safe you can go? Someone I might ring for you?" Charlotte shook her head miserably. "I don't know anyone's number, and I haven't any money for a taxi or coach." Oliver stood, pulling out his mobile. "Don't worry yourself about that for a moment. First, let's get you dried off and comfortable. Then we'll sort out the rest." He turned to the attendant. "Have you got any towels about? Perhaps a blanket or jacket?" The boy disappeared into the back room and returned with several clean shop towels and a fleece jacket. Oliver draped the jacket gently around Charlotte's shoulders. "Here's what we're going to do," Oliver said, his voice calm and authoritative. "I'm going to drive you wherever you need to go. A hospital if you'd like to be examined. A friend's home, a hotel, whatever you require. No arguments whatsoever. But I cannot pay you back, Charlotte protested weakly. I'm not asking you to, Oliver said firmly. What your husband did was unconscionable on every conceivable level. Nobody deserves to be abandoned in such a manner, especially not someone in your situation. So please, allow me to help you. Charlotte looked at this complete stranger who had appeared out of the storm like an answer to prayers she hadn't even known she was offering. Why are you doing this for me? Oliver was quiet for a moment. Because someone helped my younger sister years ago when she found herself in desperate straits with nowhere to turn. I've never forgotten what that compassion meant to her, to our entire family. He offered his hand. Come along. Let's get you somewhere warm and safe. They made their way to Oliver's car, and he helped her into the passenger seat with such gentleness that Charlotte felt tears threatening again. As they pulled away from the petrol station, she glanced back at the lonely building one final time, at the place where her marriage had ended so brutally. Where would you like me to take you? Oliver asked. Charlotte realized she hadn't the faintest idea. I genuinely don't know. I haven't anywhere to go. Oliver glanced at her thoughtfully. All right, here's a suggestion. There's a rather nice hotel approximately 30 kilometers from here. Proper place, safe and comfortable. I'll arrange a room for you for several days whilst you work out your next steps. And tomorrow, when you're rested and dry, we can begin making proper plans. I couldn't possibly let you do that, Charlotte said. It's far too much. Charlotte, Oliver said gently, you're 7.5 months pregnant, and you've just experienced something genuinely traumatic. Let someone look after you, just for tonight. Please. Perhaps it was exhaustion, or pregnancy hormones, or simply the overwhelming nature of everything that had happened. But Charlotte found herself nodding. All right then. Thank you so very much. The hotel was indeed lovely, far nicer than Charlotte had dared expect. Oliver checked her in, paying for 3 nights up front, and insisted on accompanying her to her room. Get some proper rest, he said at the door. Have a hot shower, order room service, whatever you need. Here's my business card with my mobile number. Ring me if you need absolutely anything, and I do mean anything at all. I'll check on you tomorrow if that's acceptable. Charlotte took the card, reading it through blurry eyes. Oliver Thornton, Managing Director, Thornton Property Group. She looked up at him in surprise. Oliver smiled slightly. The title doesn't matter just now. I'm simply someone who wants to ensure you're all right. After he left, Charlotte stood in the hotel room for a considerable time, trying to process everything that had occurred. Marcus had abandoned her. A stranger had rescued her. Her entire existence had transformed in the span of 60 minutes. She took a long, scalding shower, washing away the rain and the tears and the shock. When she emerged, wrapped in the hotel's luxurious dressing gown, she discovered that Oliver had arranged for the hotel staff to bring up some essentials. Clothes in her size, toiletries, even a pregnancy support pillow. The sheer kindness of it completely undid her, and she sat on the bed and wept again, though these tears were different. Not purely grief and shock, but also a strange sense of relief. Marcus had revealed his true character, and in doing so, he'd actually liberated her. The following morning, there was a knock at her door. Charlotte opened it to find Oliver standing there with coffee and an extensive breakfast spread. I wasn't entirely certain what you could eat, he said apologetically. So I'm afraid I rather overdid it. They sat together at the small table by the window, and Oliver helped Charlotte begin formulating a proper plan. He rang a solicitor he knew who specialized in family law. He found her an obstetrician who could accept her as a patient immediately. He even contacted a social worker who could help her navigate her options moving forward. You don't have to do all of this, Charlotte said as he made call after call on her behalf. I know I don't have to, Oliver replied. I want to. Over the following days, Oliver checked in regularly. He brought meals, offered advice, listened attentively whenever Charlotte needed to talk. He never overstepped boundaries, never made her uncomfortable, simply provided steady, dependable support. On the 3rd day, he arrived with unexpected news. I've been considering something, he said. I own several properties throughout the city. There's a small house, 3 bedrooms, in an excellent neighborhood near a hospital. It's been sitting empty for months now. You could stay there at least until you've had the baby and sorted out your next steps. No rent whatsoever. Oliver, I absolutely cannot accept that. You can and you will, Oliver said firmly. Charlotte, what Marcus did was utterly unforgivable. But that doesn't mean you must struggle alone through this. Let people help you. Let me help you. Something in his tone made Charlotte study him more carefully. Why are you truly doing this? And please don't simply say it's because of your sister. Oliver was silent for a long moment. My wife passed away 4 years ago, he said finally. Ovarian cancer. We've been trying for children, but it never happened for us. After she died, I buried myself in work completely, built my company into something quite successful, but it all felt hollow and meaningless. He met her eyes. Helping you, watching you fight for your daughter, seeing you refuse to surrender despite everything that's happened. It's reminded me that there are things infinitely more important than business deals and profit margins. You've reminded me what actually matters in this life. Charlotte felt tears pricking her eyes yet again. I'm an absolute mess, Oliver. I'm pregnant and abandoned, and I haven't the slightest idea how I'm going to support myself and a baby. You're not a mess, Oliver said quietly. You're one of the strongest people I've ever encountered, and you're not going to face this alone. I promise you that. Charlotte moved into the small house the following week. It was perfect, warm and secure, with a nursery that Oliver had already furnished with everything a newborn could possibly need. This is completely excessive, Charlotte protested when she saw it. It's precisely what's needed, Oliver replied with a gentle smile. As the weeks passed and Charlotte's due date approached, Oliver became a constant, comforting presence in her life. He drove her to medical appointments. He assembled baby furniture with endless patience. He sat with her in the evenings, keeping her company, making her laugh properly for the first time in months, helping her understand that her life wasn't ending but simply beginning differently than she'd planned. And somewhere along the way, gratitude transformed into genuine friendship, and friendship transformed into something infinitely deeper. Charlotte went into labor on a Thursday evening. Oliver was there within minutes of her call, driving her to hospital, staying by her side through every contraction, every push, every moment of fear and pain and ultimately overwhelming joy. When her daughter was born, pink and perfect and screaming with magnificently healthy lungs, Oliver was the one who cut the umbilical cord at the midwife's invitation. And when the nurses asked who he was, Charlotte found herself saying without hesitation, "He's family." Marcus never returned. His solicitor sent divorce papers, which Charlotte signed without a moment's hesitation. There was a settlement, enough money to provide some financial security, but Charlotte didn't want anything substantial from him. She had something far more valuable now. 7 months after that rainy day at the petrol station, Oliver asked Charlotte to dinner, not as a friend or a benefactor, but as something more significant. I know the timing might not be ideal, he said, more nervous than she'd ever seen him. And I know you're still healing from what Marcus did to you. But Charlotte, I've fallen completely in love with you and little Sophie both. And if you'll allow me, I'd like to be part of your lives properly. Not as someone who's simply helping you, but as someone who genuinely loves you both. Charlotte looked at this man who had appeared out of the storm like a miracle, who had seen her at her absolute lowest and chosen to lift her up, who had given without ever asking for anything in return, who had shown her daughter more love in 7 months than her biological father had shown in a lifetime. I love you too, she said simply, honestly. They married 14 months later in a small, intimate ceremony in the garden of the house Oliver had given her, the house that had become their home. Sophie was the flower girl, toddling down the makeshift aisle with considerably more enthusiasm than coordination, and everyone present laughed and cried simultaneously. In her vows, Charlotte spoke about that day at the petrol station, about being abandoned in the rain and finding salvation in the form of a stranger with kind eyes and an extraordinarily generous heart. You could have simply driven past, she said, her voice thick with emotion. You could have decided I wasn't your concern, that helping me wasn't your responsibility. But you stopped. You saw someone desperately in need, and you chose to help without any expectation of reward or reciprocation. You gave me shelter when I had none, support when I needed it most desperately, and love when I believed I'd never trust anyone again. You saved me, Oliver, and I will spend the rest of my life feeling grateful that you stopped that day. Oliver's vows were simpler, but equally profound. You were kneeling in the rain at a petrol station, abandoned and utterly alone, and you were the most beautiful thing I'd ever witnessed. Not because of your appearance, but because of your strength, your determination, your absolute refusal to give up even when you had every reason to surrender. You taught me that wealth means nothing if we don't use it to help others. That success isn't measured in pounds and pence, but in the lives we touch and improve. You and Sophie have given me purpose and meaning and a family I genuinely thought I'd never have. Thank you for letting me stop that day. Thank you for letting me stay. Years later, when Sophie was old enough to understand properly, Charlotte told her the complete story of how she and Oliver had met. She didn't sugarcoat Marcus's abandonment or pretend it hadn't been devastating, but she framed it as the beginning of their real story, the moment when their family had truly started to form. Sometimes, sweetheart, Charlotte told her daughter, the worst things that happen to us lead directly to the best things. Your biological father left us, yes, but in leaving us, he freed us to find Oliver, your real father, the man who chose to love us unconditionally. And Sophie, who had grown up secure in Oliver's love, who had never known what it felt like to have a father who wasn't completely devoted to her, would hug them both tightly and say, I'm so glad he stopped at the petrol station that day. So am I, darling, Charlotte would reply, looking at her husband with the kind of love that survives any storm. So am I. Because Marcus had driven away that rainy October day, leaving Charlotte alone at a remote petrol station. He'd believed he was escaping responsibility, choosing himself over his family, reclaiming his freedom. But in reality, he'd set them free. Free to be found by someone better, someone kinder, someone who understood that the true measure of a person isn't their wealth or status, but their willingness to stop when someone needs help, to offer shelter in the storm, to choose love even when it's profoundly inconvenient. Oliver had been driving to a property viewing that day, not a spa hotel. He'd been a stranger who saw someone in desperate trouble and chose to help without hesitation. And in doing so, he'd found his family. Sometimes salvation arrives in the form of abandonment. Sometimes we must be left behind before we can truly move forward. And sometimes the worst moment of our lives is actually the doorway to something infinitely better than we ever imagined possible. Charlotte had been left in the rain, broken and alone, but she'd also been found, and that made absolutely all the difference. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Your support helps us continue bringing these powerful stories to life. What do you think about Charlotte's journey? Have you ever experienced something that seemed like the worst moment of your life, only to realize later it led you exactly where you needed to be? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your story. Until next time, remember that sometimes the universe has to close one door completely before it can open a better